da Conferência, voltar a repetir esse mesmo sucesso. Vamos reiniciar os trabalhos da segunda Conferência Internacional Riscos, Segurança e Cidadania, organizada em parceria pela Câmara Municipal de Setúbal, pelo Centro de Estudos e Intervenção em Proteção Civil, pelo Instituto de Geografia e Ordenamento do Território da Universidade de Lisboa e também pelo Instituto Politécnico de Setúbal. Vai seguir-se a projeção de vídeos sobre a atividade de proteção civil no município de Setúbal e dos respectivos serviços municipais de proteção civil. Antes de vermos os vídeos, chamo aqui ao palco José Luís Busch, que é o coordenador do serviço, que nos vai explicar exatamente o que é que vamos ter a oportunidade de ver já a seguir.
Bom dia a todos, obrigado ao Paulo Sérgio, obrigado por mais uma vez estar a colaborar aqui com a organização desta conferência. Não me vou alongar muito, até porque, como sabem, uma imagem vale muito mais do que 1000 palavras e, por isso, aquilo que vamos hoje aqui assistir não estará seguramente ao nível do espetáculo que ontem tivemos a oportunidade de assistir. Para aqueles que cá estiveram ontem, os que não estiveram, recomendo que vejam no YouTube o espetáculo que decorreu aqui ontem, a par de toda a outra atividade do dia, já que ontem e hoje estamos a transmitir a conferência em streaming. E aquilo que vamos ver são 3 filmes. O primeiro filme é sobre o município de Setúbal e a organização da proteção civil. O segundo filme é sobre um exercício live-ex que realizámos no final do ano passado, o Mitrex 2018, em colaboração com muitos parceiros, e que envolveu mais de 6.000 pessoas. O terceiro e último filme será sobre o sismo que ocorreu em Portugal há 50 anos atrás, na madrugada do dia 28 de fevereiro de 1969. E nós realizamos aqui uma conferência para assinalarmos essa data, para criarmos memória e o que nos obrigou também a fazer um pouco de pesquisa para que tenhamos mais informação sobre as coisas que ocorrem na nossa cidade e no nosso concelho. Por isso vou deixar-vos com estes 3 filmes. Peço desculpa por não distribuirmos pipocas, mas muito obrigado mais uma vez por terem vindo.
Setúbal is a city and a municipality in Portugal with an area of 230 square kilometers and a resident population of approximately 117,000 people. It is located on the northern bank of the Sado River estuary, approximately 40 kilometers south of Portugal's capital, Lisbon. It is also the seat of Setúbal district. The territory is exposed to all risks, natural, technological and social, except the volcanic, being periodically affected by forest, urban and industrial fires, floods, transport accidents, NRBQ incidents, port activity accidents and minor social disturbs. In 1755, the city was seriously affected by an earthquake and a subsequent tsunami, 3 waves, and urban fires. To coordinate city risk management activities and operational response to small or major accidents and/or catastrophes or crises, the municipality has specialized structures. Municipal Security Council of Setúbal, Municipal Civil Protection Commission of Setúbal Direction, Municipal Service of Civil Protection and Firefighting of Setúbal Coordination, and permanent municipal operations comprising the Municipal Coordination of Rescue Operations, Setúbal Company of Firefighting Sappers, Setúbal Voluntary Firefighters, and Regional Red Cross.
Central de Setúbal que ficou 03 informa que não está próximo de habitações, o incidente, nem de veículos ligeiros, está próximo de algumas instalações fabris. Descarrilamento de fuga de amigo, havia tocado para a intervenção e cederem ao tampamento da fuga. O que ocorreu foi um descarrilamento com um vagão que teve origem, transportava uma substância que era amoníaco, deu origem a uma fuga, o descarrilamento deu origem a uma fuga, que entretanto foi colmatada com a equipa Grupo de Intervenção de Matérias Perigosas dos Chapadores de Setúbal. Essa fuga deu origem a uma nuvem tóxica que foi necessário processar a evacuação aqui da localidade e de alguns sítios adjacentes aqui na zona da Mitrena. Esta situação envolveu depois alguns incidentes paralelos, nomeadamente numas carruagens junto ao Instituto Politécnico, de origem a 25 vítimas mortais, algumas vítimas também aqui na estação das Praias de Sado e na escola primária ali um pouco mais à frente.
O Mitrex este ano focou-se num produto químico que é o amoníaco, um produto químico bastante tóxico. E neste momento o que se conseguiu observar foi que houve uma resposta pronta da equipa de produtos perigosos da nossa companhia de sapadores bombeiros e essa resposta pronta permitiu debelar o derrame muito rapidamente. Portanto, todos os serviços envolvidos, desde a estrutura de comando, a estrutura de controle, a estrutura de direção política, a estrutura logística, até agora, pelo menos naquilo que é o essencial, dá-nos a entender que a resposta foi uma resposta positiva.
Nós começámos a preparar este simulacro, este exercício, digamos, tendo em linha de conta a Península da Mitrena, onde estão sediadas uma série de empresas com alto risco, não é? De contaminação, de provocar algum desastre ecológico ou trágico para as populações.
Bom, os objetivos são vários. O primeiro é testar o plano de emergência externo especial da Península da Mitrena, que envolve um conjunto de empresas de risco significativo, testar o dispositivo municipal de proteção civil, testar as comunicações a utilizar em caso de acidente grave ou catástrofe, como seria o cenário ou os cenários que foram concebidos para este exercício, e testar também o desempenho e a articulação entre os vários elementos e as várias forças que intervêm no terreno em caso de acidente grave ou catástrofe.
A intervenção foi um sucesso, conseguimos chegar ao nosso propósito, que era salvaguardar o maior número possível de vidas humanas e tamponar a cisterna para que não houvesse grande fuga do produto.
O objetivo é esse, é premeditar, é prever, é criar cenários, é pôr as várias organizações a falar umas entre outras, é as pessoas se conhecerem, que depois, na altura do risco, porque há sempre, ao menor ou pior, há sempre risco, as coisas estarem mais afinadas.
Sou professora universitária da Faculdade de Ciências de Paris e desenvolvi durante uma dezena de anos um simulador de gestão operacional para gestão de catástrofes. A Proteção Civil Municipal de Setúbal criou uma versão do simulador e então estamos atualmente a validá-lo e utilizamos o Mitrex como um quadro mais alargado para verificar as funções, as possibilidades e a certa utilização operacional do simulador.
Queria só realçar de facto a importância destes exercícios para o conhecimento de nós próprios, portanto daquilo das práticas das outras empresas aqui no grupo da Mitrena ou na Península da Mitrena, da importância que é conhecermos uns aos outros, sabermos quais os riscos a que poderemos estar sujeitos, não só dentro das nossas fábricas, mas também nas fábricas anexas e saber os meios que temos à disposição por parte das autoridades que nos poderão ajudar no caso de um sinistro de maiores dimensões.
E quando falamos de situações em que tratamos de vida humana, cada segundo faz a diferença. E o facto das pessoas conhecerem e saberem o que é que devem fazer perante uma situação real que vai acontecer, só não sabemos quando, faz toda a diferença.
Eu, como representante da Lisnave, tenho a agradecer toda esta disponibilidade do Serviço Municipal para podermos testar em conjunto com as outras empresas o chamado efeito dominó nestas situações. Portanto, que é o efeito que vai dar origem a que um acidente provocado numa empresa vá ter reflexo em todas as outras, ou mesmo fora da empresa, que foi o caso deste Mitrex 2018.
Para nós tem sido sempre com agrado a colaboração junto da Proteção Civil em vários exercícios internos e externos que tivemos também em 2012 e para nós é sempre uma fonte também de melhoria, quer interna e quer com as relações com as entidades de proteção civil municipais essencialmente e com os bombeiros também locais. Participámos desde o início em toda a preparação e é com grande expectativa que aguardamos o próximo evento, ao qual nos iremos naturalmente associar, porque de facto reconhecemos aqui uma grande mais-valia na melhoria de todos e para que de facto alguma situação eventual possa ser minimizada em termos de consequências para todos.
Este tipo de exercícios como o Mitrex também nos permite fazer este tipo de teste sempre enquadrado no todo, ou seja, nós, os nossos vizinhos e também todas as forças que nos ajudam e nos fazem melhorar sempre ano após ano. Correu bastante bem este exercício e, aliás, não nos interessa tanto correr bem, mas sim percebermos onde é que temos que trabalhar mais para conseguir mais sinergias, mais cooperação e para que consigamos alcançar aquilo que pretendemos, que é a proteção de todos.
Um simulacro como a Mitrex justamente deve servir para pôr em evidência os desfuncionamentos, sobretudo na relação inter-instituições. Desse ponto de vista, houve um certo número de ocorrências que não funcionaram bem, o que é normal e o que é uma boa coisa, porque vão permitir de corrigir a situação.
Poner em marcha actuações que en un momento serán necesarias. Sempre os bombeiros, os equipos de emergencia sempre traballan ante un imprevisto, pero se han preparado posibles intervenções, seguramente a intervenção será mais real, mais perfeita.
Aliás, nós já tivemos em Setúbal situações reais em que o facto de termos feito simulacros pensando nessa hipótese de risco permitiu que nós tivéssemos uma intervenção mais eficaz do que se não tivéssemos feito esses simulacros previamente.
Portanto, o centro hospitalar, como sendo a unidade hospitalar, vai dar todo o apoio em relação às vítimas que possam ocorrer numa situação de emergência, e neste caso no Mitrex também, 2018. Portanto, nós vamos receber as vítimas, nós estamos também como elemento, somos um agente também de proteção civil da comunidade, fazemos parte da Comissão Municipal de Proteção Civil, sou representante dessa comissão e, como tal, faço também a ligação entre a comissão, aquilo que é solicitado à comissão, e o próprio centro hospitalar em relação a todas as situações que possam ocorrer e das pessoas que tenham que ser encaminhadas, quer vítimas que precisem de auxílio, adultos, crianças, grávidas, portanto são as 3 urgências que nós temos a nível da instituição. Se for necessário, conforme que seja o nível, ativamos o nosso plano de catástrofes externas, com várias medidas a nível do hospital, no sentido de receber as multivítimas que possam acontecer e que possam ocorrer. E depois também a recepção de cadáveres, se for o caso, que tenham que ir para o gabinete médico-legal e para a nossa morgue do hospital.
O objetivo desta experiência a nível dos cuidados primários será também testar a nossa capacidade de reação a situações de emergência e também a articulação naturalmente com o hospital de referência, que é o Centro Hospitalar de Setúbal, e estando naturalmente também a seguir as orientações da Proteção Civil.
Polícia Marítima de Montgomery.
para a Junta de Freguesia numa situação destas, portanto, é estar envolvida juntamente com as forças de segurança, neste caso com a Proteção Civil, e tentarmos de todas as maneiras resolvermos os problemas que nos estão deparados quando acontecem estas catástrofes. E é por isso que aqui estamos, portanto, a Proteção Civil, e a colaborar com as forças de segurança para tentarmos minimizar os prejuízos causados na nossa freguesia.
A avaliação é uma avaliação muito positiva que nos vai formar para praticarmos o socorro que certamente será necessário numa situação real. Naturalmente estamos aqui a falar de uma situação de simulacro, mas o que é importante é agora avaliarmos aquilo que corre bem e aquilo que corre menos bem, no sentido de corrigirmos aquilo que correu menos bem e darmos potencial àquilo que correu bem.
Provou-se ali, mais uma vez, que a única possibilidade que temos, no caso real de evacuação dos trabalhadores da Península, terá que ser feito via marítima, utilizando o ferry-boat ou, eventualmente, reboques da Lisnave, se for o caso disso. Neste caso, mais uma vez, foi através da Atlântico Ferries, utilizando um ferry-boat que faz deslocar as pessoas, neste caso para Setúbal, e poderão ir para a Troia.
Eu penso que foi mais um sucesso, foi um grande sucesso. Movimentou mais de 5.000 pessoas, à volta de 6.500, entre as escolas, as pessoas das empresas, as instituições todas.
A avaliação é muito positiva, nota-se que as pessoas estão todas empenhadas. Entendo que num futuro seria importante que no terreno, no teatro de operações, houvesse mais entidades participantes, mas isto faz-se um caminho caminhando. E todo o trabalho feito aqui, quer no âmbito da Comissão Municipal de Proteção Civil, quer pelos operacionais do terreno, quer pelas empresas que participaram no exercício, é fundamental para a segurança.
E foi uma maneira de ficarmos um bocadinho mais descansados na nossa maneira de atuar, demonstrarmos essas capacidades, de forma a que as pessoas se sintam mais seguras com a nossa atuação. Envolveu igualmente a Comissão Municipal de Proteção Civil, com todos os seus intervenientes, que é fundamental mantermos os contactos, é fundamental percebermos como é que devemos atuar e afinar procedimentos. Permitiu igualmente detectar lacunas que existem em termos de equipamento, testamos o equipamento de alta capacidade, que era uma bomba de alta capacidade que está nas instalações da administração do Porto de Setúbal. Correu bem, ou seja, correu mal. Pronto. O objetivo, quando se fala em correr bem ou correr mal, é efetivamente demonstramos que ali não é o sítio primordial para a bomba estar. Nós suspeitávamos e o exercício deles possibilitou-nos demonstrar essa lacuna e vamos, obviamente, corrigi-la. Portanto, estes exercícios são de repetir regularmente porque servem de teste e de descanso para toda a comunidade que estamos a trabalhar no bom sentido.
E estamos à espera do próximo, esperemos que, não sabemos se é já para o ano, se não for para o ano, mas daqui por 2 anos, termos o próximo para dar andamento a este processo.
Aquilo que eu penso que o Mitrex mais uma vez vem demonstrar é a necessidade premente de se fazerem exercícios a este nível, e Setúbal está, sem dúvida nenhuma, à frente de muitos concelhos no país, porque de facto tem uma proatividade na resposta a situações de desastre que é de facto absolutamente remarcável.
Agora há uma reunião de balanço para todas as entidades dizerem o que é que falhou da parte de cada um, o que é que foi negativo, o que é que foi positivo, o que é que temos de limar e de acertar para que de facto não existam falhas nenhumas se algum dia acontecer algo do género.
Na madrugada de uma sexta-feira chuvosa de inverno, no dia 28 de fevereiro de 1969, registrou-se o último grande sismo sentido no território de Portugal continental. Do terremoto resultaram 13 vítimas mortais, dezenas de feridos, habitações destruídas, alarme e pânico entre a população. O momento do primeiro abalo, as várias réplicas subsequentes e os seus efeitos permanecem ainda hoje, 50 anos envolvidos, na memória de todos os que viveram este dia.
As coisas começaram a cair na sala, da estante, tudo a cair e a partir-se, e eu acendi a luz momentaneamente.
Senti as janelas a tremer, senti as portas a tremer, barulhos dos vidros dentro dos copos da minha mãe, não sei o quê.
Há uma sensação que a pessoa se levanta e quando põe o pé no chão nem sabe se vai cair, se vai andar, é uma sensação horrível.
Julgo que logo mesmo antes de nos apercebermos, nós humanos nos apercebermos do sismo, os animais devem ter pressentido e começaram de facto logo a ladrar.
De repente sinto que as paredes laterais do quarto se uniam, que deixava de haver teto.
Fujam e disse assim à gente, ponham-se aqui no meio da porta.
Senti os vidros tremer. E ouvi um grande barulho na cozinha, fui à cozinha, era um bocado da chaminé que entrou no chão.
Quando olhei para a janela, para a persiana, vi uma claridade estranha lá fora e um ruído enorme.
Viemos aqui para a rua, acompanhar outras pessoas que andavam aqui na rua também, a ver se naquele largozinho ali havia a hipótese de nos arrumarmos sem levar com os prédios em cima.
Da Praça do Casco caiu uma cruz lá de cima, em cima do carro do padre. E o pessoal comentava, mas era só restrito aqui a nós, ninguém se sabia das informações, não havia a comunicação que há hoje.
Lembro-me de ter pensado, pronto, vai-se tudo acabar aqui, pá.
O sismo teve epicentro no leito do Oceano Atlântico, a cerca de 300 km a sudoeste de Setúbal, na envolvência do local onde se encontram as placas tectónicas euroasiática e africana. As primeiras testemunhas dos efeitos do sismo de 1969 são as tripulações de navios como o SO Newcastle e o Ido Knutsen, que estavam em trânsito no Atlântico, perto do epicentro. Membros da tripulação relatam a sensação de que o navio estivesse a ser erguido da água. Referem-se a ondas descomunais à água do mar como castanha e espessa. Tal como em 1755, com as devidas distâncias em termos de intensidade e danos registados, o sismo de 1969 gera assim um pequeno tsunami, que foi assinalado em diversos marégrafos localizados na costa portuguesa, marroquina e espanhola. Mas antes da sua chegada à costa, já o território continental português, em particular o Algarve, sentiam os efeitos das ondas sísmicas do primeiro abalo. O jornal O Setubalense escreve na sua edição de 1 de março que o abalo sísmico se verificou em Setúbal pelas 3 horas 41 minutos e 5 segundos, tendo sido sentido durante cerca de 1 minuto. Alguns relógios pararam neste preciso momento e muitas pessoas saltam da sua cama e fogem espavoridas para a rua. As casas e o seu recheio oscilam devido ao movimento que lhes é induzido a partir do solo. Alheios às previsões de chuva da meteorologia para o dia em causa, centenas de pessoas concentram-se em praças, espaços públicos amplos ou fora da área urbana da cidade.
Eu assustei muito, agarrei na minha filha ao colo, chamei o meu irmão que estava a dormir e meus pais e viemos todos para a rua. E quando chegámos à rua é que vimos aqui um grande alvoroço na rua, estava tudo na rua a dizer que era um tremor de terra, era um tremor de terra.
Os vidrinhos a bater. E a minha irmã toda aflita a pegar-me em mim, rua, e viemos todos e toda a gente veio para a rua.
A minha irmã abriu a porta e ela foi para os escados abaixo, eu também fui atrás dela
Soube também que no dia seguinte começou a circular aí que tinha caído a cruz da igreja de São Julião. Achava aquilo estranho. Em cima do carro do padre, um carro novo.
Depois aquilo parou.
Andámos a ver algumas ruas sempre com o cuidado de passar por meio da estrada, nunca encostada aos prédios. Muitas casas ali em Troino também com rachadelas ali naquela parte da rua direita, naquela zona ali dos combatentes. Também havia umas casas que tinham uns bonequinhos lá em cima, também caídos no chão. A igreja creio que a igreja de São Julião também ficou muito danificada. Portanto, vimos coisas caídas da igreja de São Julião.
O mais evidente, portanto, é um prédio que se encontra aqui na rua Almeida Garrete, que é o mais antigo da rua e que se notou logo na altura que ficou inclinado, com uma inclinação para dentro, e essa inclinação, portanto, é visível, como ainda é hoje. Foi o edifício que chamou logo mais a atenção. Daí que nós, portanto, indagámos junto da família que lá vivia, se estava tudo bem, e de facto não houve danos físicos, mas houve alguns estragos materiais. Nomeadamente a casa ficou, portanto, desnivelada.
Começaram a dizer que ali o moinho tinha brechas muito grandes, e de facto tinha, teve que ir abaixo.
O moinho do bairro Rendeiro?
Aquele, sim, o moinho. E às 5 da manhã o meio da morada é à minha procura.
Havia casas possivelmente que ninguém podia voltar para lá, não é? Não, porque estavam mais danificadas, então, claro, era difícil numa cidade antiga, com casas velhas, poderem socorrer com poucos meios. Com poucos meios, mas pronto, foi assim. Se alguém morreu em Setúbal devido a isso, não me lembro de ter ouvido nada.
Na sequência do abalo sísmico registado em Setúbal, há a registar 4 feridos, uma residente no Largo dos Ximenes e 3 empregadas do restaurante do Clube Naval Setubalense. No bairro Santos Nicolau e no bairro Rendeiro, há a registar também 10 desalojados. O município tem realizado na última década um substancial investimento na Companhia de Bombeiros Chapadores. Simultaneamente, esse investimento tem-se alargado através dos protocolos estabelecidos aos bombeiros voluntários de Setúbal e à delegação de Setúbal da Cruz Vermelha Portuguesa. A Proteção Civil Municipal, no seu papel coordenador e potenciador das mais-valias e potencialidades próprias, no contexto de intervenção de cada uma destas unidades, olha para a prestação de socorro no concelho na perspectiva de um dispositivo municipal de socorro único. Um bom exemplo disso foi a constituição, em 2014, do Centro Municipal de Operações de Socorro, que depende do Serviço Municipal de Proteção Civil e Bombeiros. Trata-se de um centro operacional único de despacho de meios, apetrechado com a melhor tecnologia do mercado. No âmbito das suas responsabilidades, o município de Setúbal tem, através do Serviço Municipal de Proteção Civil, desenvolvido um conjunto de instrumentos de planeamento, dos quais, no contexto de ocorrência de um sismo, destacamos os Planos Municipal de Emergência de Proteção Civil, de Evacuação da Cidade e de Intervenção no Centro Histórico. Após um sismo, se estiver na rua e se encontrar na área do Centro Histórico de Setúbal, dirija-se a um dos pontos informativos que a Proteção Civil Municipal instalou nesta área da cidade, onde receberá informação sobre os procedimentos a adotar no imediato. Para encontrar os referidos pontos informativos, basta consultar a sinalética espalhada por todo o centro histórico. No concelho de Setúbal, mais especificamente no Parque Urbano de Albarquel, existe um sistema de alerta de tsunami, composto por um painel informativo, sirene e uma luz rotativa. O equipamento está integrado numa rede que cobre várias regiões do mundo e nele podem encontrar-se informações após a ocorrência de um sismo. O seu envolvimento e manutenção encontra-se a cargo do Centro de Investigação Comum da Comunidade Europeia. Na Frente Ribeirinha, de acordo com diversos estudos realizados entre o Instituto de Geografia e Ordenamento do Território e o Serviço Municipal de Proteção Civil e Bombeiros, poderá encontrar sinalética de perigo, a definição de caminhos de fuga e a localização de áreas seguras. Antes de um sismo, tsunami ou outra catástrofe natural, ou induzida pelo homem, há um conjunto de cuidados que devemos assumir para a nossa proteção individual ou das nossas famílias.
Instalo o Setúbal SOS no telemóvel. Tenho um local acessível no número municipal de socorro.
800-212-216.
Tenha sempre à mão uma mochila de emergência. Prepare a caixa de emergência para ter em casa com 5 litros de água por pessoa, alimentos enlatados e um abre-latas manual, todos os primeiros socorros e medicamentos para doenças crónicas.
Apito para alertar e pedir ajuda.
Lanterna com pilhas convocadas e suplentes. Rádio pequena pilhas. Artigos de higiene pessoal.
Sabonete.
Papel higiênico. Escova e pasta de dentes. Um canivete. Um lápis e um bloco de notas.
Uma lista de telefones e moradas de contacto,
incluindo amigos e familiares que residam noutra cidade. Sem crianças, inclua artigos para o nosso cuidado. Prepare a sua mochila de emergência. Com a cópia do cartão de cidadão.
Com uma garrafa de água de 1,5 litro.
Uma lanterna com pilhas suplentes. Um rádio pequeno a pilhas.
Roupa básica.
Meias em roupa interior. Calçado cómodo e resistente.
Um impermeável leve.
Artigos de higiene pessoal. Um kit de primeiros socorros. E medicamentos que utilizem para doenças crónicas.
Um canivete.
Um lápis e um bloco de notas. Mapas da cidade e da região.
Elabora o seu plano de emergência familiar.
Os adultos e as crianças devem dialogar se ocorrer um sismo. Ensina as crianças a desligar a eletricidade, a água e o gás. Durante um sismo,
dirija-se a um lugar seguro
e mantenha-se afastado de janelas, espelhos, chaminés e outros objetos. Pratique os gestos básicos: baixar, proteger e guardar. E depois de um sismo, mantenha a calma e conte com a ocorrência de possíveis réplicas.
Não acenda fósforos nem isqueiros, pois pode haver uma fuga de gás.
Corte imediatamente o gás, a eletricidade e a água. Observe se a sua casa sofreu danos graves. Saia imediatamente se não for segura.
Nunca utilize o elevador.
Afaste-se de praias e zonas costeiras baixas. Depois de um sismo pode ocorrer um tsunami. Se estiver na rua, não vá para casa. Dirija-se para um ponto de concentração se estiver num centro histórico. Procure informação ligando rádio ou televisão. Procurar informação nas redes sociais. Tenha cuidado com as notícias falsas.
Proteção Civil. Um trabalho de todos, para todos.
Para aqui ficaram belos vídeos, belas mensagens. Preparar é preciso, é verdade que ninguém quer que aconteça, mas se acontecer que todos estejamos preparados. Ora, depois de termos visto estes 3 vídeos, vamos constituir a mesa do painel do programa desta manhã. Chamamos para o efeito Charles Babion, em representação da Organização para a Cooperação e Desenvolvimento Económico, OCDE. Peço que tomem lugar na mesa que está aqui do meu lado esquerdo. Lina Kolerniskova, do Instituto de Proteção Civil e Gestão de Emergências do Reino Unido. e ainda Ana Latournelle, professora da Escola Superior de Saúde do Instituto Politécnico de Setúbal. Modera este painel Bogoslava Sardinha, a diretora da Escola Superior de Ciências Empresariais do Instituto Politécnico de Setúbal. Chamo a vossa especial atenção para o facto de quem quiser colocar questões ao painel, na altura das perguntas e respostas, deverá fazê-lo através desta aplicação e, portanto, quem não quiser colocar perguntas, mas votar nas perguntas, também o pode fazer naquela página de internet com aquela password que aqui está. Sei que ontem isto foi um verdadeiro sucesso e, portanto, vamos voltar hoje a utilizar. Muito bem, vamos então para a discussão desta manhã. Bom trabalho. Até já.
Sim. Bom dia a todos. Mais um dia de conferência. Hoje temos 3 excelentes comunicadores. Vamos começar, penso, com Charles Bouillon. Desculpa. Conforme foi apresentado, Charles Bouillon is a Risk Governance Expert and Public Governance Directorate of Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation. Since 2012, he supports the activities of OECD High-Level Risk Forum in areas like resilience of critical infrastructure, science, policy interface, strategic crisis management, and peer reviews of risk management policies. He also conducts risk governance reviews in France, UK, Finland, Mexico, and Morocco. And he also worked in OECD as Development Cooperation Directorate in 2016 as a part of the peer review team. Hydrologist by training, Mr. Bouillon has been working on risk management on water resources management in China, Europe, North Africa, and international level, both on public policy and the scientific level. He has an enormous and impressive number of publications about governance of critical risks, about the building resilience, about the resilience in major floods, about the, I have huge number of publications about supplied city and water, etc., etc. So please, Charles, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, for this introduction, quite long, quite with a good description of what I did. Thank you and buen dia to everybody. I would like to thank in particular our hosts at the City of Setúbal and Protection Civil. We are very much welcome here. It's very nice and it's a particularly interesting program. The OECD is glad to be present with you today. So why are we here? I think first and foremost we are here because when we look at the impact of disaster risks in OECD countries and more globally in BRIC countries as well over the last decade, it costed up to $1.5 trillion, enormous economic impact of disaster risks. What we do believe is that safety and security is a condition for economic development and well-being of populations, and that's what we strive for at the OECD. What we do promote is a whole-of-society approach to risk management. We think that everyone has a role to play. National government, local governments, businesses, citizens, everyone has a role to play. And that is why governance is particularly important. How to make sure that you have the right governance mechanisms to articulate all these efforts efficiently. That's what we promote with this OECD recommendation on the governance of critical risks. And what I will be talking to you today is an area where governance is particularly important. It's the resilience of critical infrastructure, and I will share with you a few thoughts on public policies in this area. What are we talking about? What is it, critical infrastructure? This is the backbone of the functioning of our societies. We're talking about energy, telecommunication, transportation, health, water, finance, what makes us every day conducting our activities, what supports the functioning of the economy and of our daily lives. When we look on the right-hand side, you can see that these are the sectors of critical infrastructures as they are defined by the OECD countries. We did a survey on this area, and you can see that the most common one is energy, IT, transportation, health, water, and finance. That can be found almost in all OECD countries. Then you can have some countries that mention public safety as a critical infrastructure sector. There's a diversity of definition and of sectors that are mentioned across the different countries. That's what we thought. Maybe there's an opportunity here to align a bit those policies across countries. Those policies, critical infrastructure policies, were mostly designed initially in the mid-2000s after the 9/11 attacks in New York, with a clear focus on security and on protection of assets. And what we do believe is that today there might be a need to shift a bit the approach to embrace resilience. Why is that? Oh, sorry. Why is that the case? Why do we need to adjust the approach? It's because we live in a very much dynamic risk landscape. All sectors of infrastructures are confronted to many hazards and threats. From natural hazards, I think everybody, when we think about critical infrastructure, everybody thinks about what happened in Japan with Fukushima. What happened when the nuclear reactor was stopped and disrupted. It led the Japanese authorities to stop the electricity production, 50% of the electricity production of the country. How can a country adapt to a 50% electricity production reduction? That's a key challenge when it happens in one country. You can think also about the volcanic ash cloud that happened in Europe in 2011 with this volcano from Iceland. I will not pronounce the name, that is too complex. How much the aerial transportation was disrupted. More recently in China, you had a major blast in Tianjin Harbor. It's the 6th harbor in the world, and all ships had to be rerouted with significant economic impacts. That's what happens when you have such disruptions. The economic and social impact can be huge. Climate change, of course, when you think that most of our energy infrastructures, where the oil refineries are located on the coastlines, how will we adapt to that? Sea level rise is a key concern, and there are other risks as well. Cyber threats is a major concern when it comes to critical infrastructure. I think 2017 was a striking year with the WannaCry and NotPetya cyber attacks, which disrupted the National Health Service in the UK, Telefonica in Spain, Deutsche Bahn in Germany, and so many others as well. There are also the rising geopolitical tensions in our world of today raises concern as well on foreign influence in some of those critical sectors. That's the landscape of today. In addition to that, we live in a world where interconnectedness, interdependencies have been rising tremendously with globalization, with innovation as well. Nowadays, I mean, if you have a disruption in one of these services, this has cascading impacts on many others. And in addition to that, those impacts can cross borders, have international consequences. The map below on the right represents the submarine cables for the internet traffic. 99% of our daily data goes through those. Yes, there are redundancies, of course, but a disruption of those cables can have major consequences if only the speed of the data transmission is reduced. And you could hear, I think earlier today, Tonga Island in the Pacific was completely disrupted from the internet during several weeks. major consequences. So that's the landscape of today, and to exemplify a bit how large those consequences can be, the cost of disruption, we did an analysis of the #1 risk in France, the risk of flood from the Seine River in Paris. And we looked at all the direct damages it could have, as well as at all the indirect consequences in terms of business losses in particular. And you can see, I mean, all those numbers, when we look at the impact on infrastructure, in terms of direct damages, we worked with 3 different scenarios. Damage to critical infrastructure were between 1.6 billion euro and 14 billion euro. And that represents between 35% to 50% of the total damages, meaning that really infrastructure is essential. But if we go beyond that and look at the indirect impact, the impact on businesses, you could see in the different scenarios that the disruption of electricity and transportation are causing more business losses than the flood itself, between 33% to 85% of the business losses. So that demonstrates the importance of critical infrastructure resilience. Well, when we think about those policies, we need also to consider that the infrastructure landscape also is evolving. There are major transformations ongoing. With digitalization, we are talking about a hyper-connected world. We will have less centralized systems of infrastructure for energy with smart grids and renewable. We are going towards autonomous vehicles. So what does it change in the resilience of our infrastructure? That needs to be accounted for. A less centralized system might be more resilient in some ways, but on the other side, there are more entry points and weak points for example, cyber attacks. Another major factor in infrastructure today is the fact that in European countries, in OECD countries, our infrastructures are getting old. And I think we've seen a tragic demonstration of that with the collapse of the Geneva Bridge and terrible consequences it had. But all in all, what we can say is that infrastructure are changing. There are major investments ongoing in infrastructure throughout the world, in Europe as well. And this can be seen also as an opportunity to invest in resilience. We are talking about $95 trillion of investments in infrastructure in the next 15 years. So what we say here is that it's not about protecting each individual assets. That is what was called critical infrastructure protection. We need to move to resilience, to embrace the changing landscape, to integrate the so many uncertainties of our dynamic risk landscape. How do we go about it? It's about combining a series of measures. You can think about system robustness and investing in really having some high-level facilities to protect against floods or sea level rise, having some very large concrete walls to protect against accidents. That's robustness. You can think about redundancies, to have several lines that will allow, if one is disrupted, another one to function. And all those measures are to be conceived in the design phase of infrastructure. But you can think also about what happens if it is disrupted, to limit not necessarily the severity of the impact, but the recovery time, backup capacities, rapid recovery, business continuity planning, and that pertains to the operational phase. And finally, I think when you think about resilience, it's particularly important to think about the future, to adapt to change, climate change, for instance. So you need also to integrate those possibilities, to retrofit your infrastructure, to make them eventually adaptable to changing conditions. And so that's the shift that needs to be happening today, to have a comprehensive policy across the life cycle of infrastructure. But this comes also with challenges, governance challenges, because indeed when we think about infrastructure resilience, this is a field where there are many different stakeholders. Infrastructure investments, the development, ownership, operation, you can have many different private sector entities that are involved into that. What we do believe is that the operators of infrastructures and the owners of infrastructures, be they public or be they private, they are the first one to be responsible for the protection of their assets and for the maintaining of the continuity of the services. And that's in their interest, of course. That's in their economic interest, and they want to do it. I think there's a very clear understanding of that. But the question for government is how to make sure that they invest sufficiently and effectively up to the level of resilience that you, as a government, expect. Because that remains a key role of governments, setting the risk of resilience level of a country. That's one of its key roles. But it plays other role also in this field. Governments also, they want infrastructure to be developed. They want infrastructure to sustain the economy. And so how do you ensure the right balance in government where you have the people in charge of risks, you want the continuity and the security, the people in charge of welcoming investors so that there are good infrastructure services in the country. They may not have the same interest. Governments also, sometimes they invest themselves, they operate infrastructure, which brings another perspective, and they are also a major user of critical infrastructure services for their own continuity. So the question in terms of public policy comes, how do you balance, how do you make the right trade-off between all those different roles? So what are the elements to put in place in a CI policy? In the OECD recommendation on the governance of critical risk, which was adopted in 2014, it really acknowledges the importance of critical infrastructure resilience and promotes a series of actions that governments can take, the need to develop fiscal and regulatory frameworks, reserve capacities, diversification, backup systems, risk management standards, business continuity, etc. And this had some form of an impact by making sure that critical infrastructure is integrated in the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and there's a target, specific target on that. We also have the Sustainable Development Goal on building resilient infrastructure adopted in 2015 by the United Nations, and the agenda on quality infrastructure that is more and more prevalent internationally, including in the G7 and in the G20 context. But that is not enough. What governments have told us when we started to evaluate how they implement those provisions is that they need more guidance. So what we did is that we organized a good discussion between governments, between operators of critical infrastructures and the research community to think more in depth about this needed shift towards resilience. We did that together with the European Union Joint Research Center. And what we found out is that there is value in promoting what we will call a system approach to critical infrastructure resilience with a series of building blocks that are here. Adopting an all-hazard and threat approach to resilience is the first one. You know, at the end of the day, given the interconnectedness of those systems, if your electricity is disrupted by a cyber attack, this has implications for all the others. But you know, you don't really care when you are an IT provider about the cause that it was a cyber attack on this electricity facility. What you care is that you do not have power. So you need, in any case, to have this all-hazard and threat approach. You need to have also, not to focus only on assets, but on system level, because at the end of the day, what you want is that the service is provided, not necessarily that that facility is well protected, but that the system keeps running. Multi-sectoral coordination is essential, public and private cooperation as well. Measures all across the life cycle, all across the risk management cycle, from assessment to prevention to emergency response and recovery. And so that leads you with a series of measures and you need to prioritize them. That's what we call this risk-based and layered approach, to prioritize the ones that are the most efficient to keep the system running. And finally, integrate the transboundary dimension given the cross-border consequences and the cross-border systems that we do have. This led us to develop the OECD policy toolkit and the governance of critical infrastructure resilience, which is still to be fully finalized. So what I present to you today is not completely finalized yet, but it will be in the coming months. The aim of this toolkit is to help governments design and implement critical infrastructure resilience policies through effective partnerships with operators. And it proposes practical guidance, good practices, benchmark indicators to do three things fundamentally. First, really to identify, map out the interdependencies and prioritize which function systems and assets are the ones that require really the most resilience investments. Second, to forge effective partnerships with operators to build trust between all these stakeholders, share information, and agree on common resilience objectives. And finally, to share responsibilities to protect these assets, ensure the quick restoration of services. These toolkits define the terms with the idea to establish a common grounds. There are many, we found out there were 31 different definitions across OECD countries on critical infrastructure, so we propose one, which is as follows. These are systems, assets, facilities, and networks that provide essential services for the functioning of the economy and the well-being of the population. Some countries integrate more issues related to national security or to continuity of government, but that's the definition that is the largest, the most inclusive one. It's not a prescriptive definition. And resilience, again, I think it's important to insist on the three components: the capacity of a system to absorb a disturbance, to recover from disruption, and to adapt to changing conditions. So I'll be not too long. I just have 3 points I want to highlight from the toolkit, if that's still okay. First, it's about assessing the criticality, the interdependencies, and the vulnerabilities of those systems. The toolkit proposes a methodology to better understand the CI risks based on 3 steps. First, mapping the interdependencies to estimate the full impact of service losses. And second, conducting a criticality assessment based on impact criteria on health, on the economy, on the environment, so that you can establish the right threshold to identify what is truly critical. And then you can conduct a resilience analysis and stress test to identify the weak points of those most critical systems. Nowadays, only 16% of OECD countries conduct interdependency mapping, but there are great progress in research and many tools are being developed. I point here to Daphne, the UK Data and Analytics Facility for National Infrastructure, which provides really excellent tools to do that. Second is to create partnerships and information sharing mechanisms. It's fundamental because at the end of the day, you need to understand the whole system. Governments need to understand what are the vulnerabilities. Operators themselves need to understand what are their dependencies on others and how those others are resilient or not. So you need fundamentally to have a very large information sharing system. But the fundamental of that, if you ask operators from the private sector to share information on their vulnerabilities, that needs to be really well ensured in terms of security, that it is not shared with their competitors. So you need to set up the right systems. At the end of the day, everyone benefits from increased resilience. So everyone has an interest to share information, but they don't want this information to go in the wrong hands, and they don't want their competitors or others not sharing information. So you need to build trust through this system. And it's only when you will have done that you will be able to develop a common vision and shared objectives. And there are good examples in various countries of the OECD going in that direction. And third and finally, it's about once you know what your risks are, your critical systems are, and you've been sharing information and you've been establishing objectives, in fact, it's just the beginning of a journey. At the end of the day, what do you want is that there are investments that are being made to strengthen the resilience of those systems. And here, there's a diversity of policy tools that governments can use. How to decide, how to find the right combination between tools that are really mandatory and very strict, based on strong regulations, and tools that are more voluntary, that ensure engagement of critical infrastructure operators. At the OECD, we have identified 22 different policy tools that can be utilized, and decision-making criteria that are part of this toolkit, from cost-benefit analysis with a view of thinking always on the potential repercussions, on the cost of services of the public policy measures that you will take, because you may not want to impose very strong regulation that will lead to 30% increase of the electricity price to citizens. They may not appreciate that. And thinking also about how to enforce those policies effectively. So I will stop there. That's the series of the different tools that we have identified. You will be able maybe to see that online, because I think I'm getting a bit over time. But it can be from information sharing to mandatory business continuity plans, to fines, to guidance mechanisms. And what we just observe is that so far, OECD countries have more privileged voluntary tools compared to mandatory tools. And I think it is revealing to the fact that it is an area where countries are still looking for engagement of operators. Once this engagement and everyone will be seeing the benefits, there will be an opportunity for mainstreaming, streamlining, and maybe having more powerful public policy tools. And finally, the toolkit, which is funded on 7 key steps from multi-sectoral governance. I went through them a bit, establishing a vision and resilience objective, mapping interdependencies, building trust through information sharing, deciding on a mix of policy tools, ensuring accountability and compliance. And finally, I did not touch too much upon that, transboundary cooperation. They're here. So I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. Thank you, Charles, to giving us some insight about how to maintain the critical infrastructure. Everybody in Portugal knows what is happened when communication infrastructure fails, so it was really, really interesting. We pass now for Lina Kolesnikova. Lina Kolesnikova is quite impressive CV, really, really impressive. He is a specialist in consultancy training and research, especially in the field of risk, crisis, and disaster management, technical, operational, and strategic level. She works in several, it's chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear risks, social media intelligence. She is associate in international risk and crisis management and Rosnova Solution, senior analysis of G3 geopolitical intelligence team, and fellow in the Institute of Civil Protection and Management, his Office for Democratic Institution of Human Rights. He holds a Master on Science degree in Risk, Crisis and Disaster Management from Leicester University, Master in History in the Novosibirsk State University, postgraduate qualification in International European Relations, Communication and Language, Strategic Skills. It's, as I thought, it's really, really impressive. Lina, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. No, okay, it's already introduction. Okay, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be in Portugal. I need to say that all conferences for me are divided in 2 groups. One group is where people call me Kalashnikov. They think that it's my surname, and another one where people pronounce my surname correctly. So in Portugal is in a group when people pronounce my surname correctly, so I'm not Kalashnikov. So I will cover more CBRN from the security point of view, but I need to say that I consult law enforcement, but I do not reflect opinion of law enforcement on this issue. So probably for many of you, you have a habit to see CBRN and E, so explosives as well. I prefer to not cover explosives at this presentation because explosives needs a lot of time, and it's a huge topic. So when we see CBRN threats, we see that they encompass a wide scope of events, including naturally occurring disasters, Fukushima was mentioned, accidental incidents at hazardous installations or during the transport of dangerous materials, as well as deliberate incidents, among which terrorist acts and state-sponsored uses. But we have to say that we also have to count incidents where law enforcement uses nerve agents for particular reasons, because we may have situations when, for example, in a hot phase of counter-terrorist operation, for example, law enforcement needs to use nerve agents, and then you may have victims as well. And cyber threats, of course, are considered as low probability, but with high impact risks. We see the change to approach to cyber threats at European level because of course, incidents which happened at EU. So, of course, you know the sad story of Salisbury attack and two plots, recent plots in France and in Germany, which were last year, and there were other incidents, of course, which need to be taken into consideration. It's Syrian conflict where chemical weapons were used. Also, the murder assassination of half-brother of Korean communist leader. Just last week, we have a case of murder of a witness at Berlusconi case, where a Siberian definitely was involved. And so we see the change to approach, and of course, Salisbury attack is a main pivotal point from which the change occurred. There are various aspects to the cyber threat. However, European policymakers and relevant security agencies are primarily concerned with terrorist groups whose intention is to acquire and carry out cyber attacks on crowded public space. We know that the main purpose of any terrorist attack is to launch fear. And of course, if you use cyber, you can succeed this. So you can really cause fear among people. And the usual question is why? Why cyber attacks different than other terrorist attacks? I would say that it's because, you know, visually you don't see it. You have, in some cases with biological elements, you have pre-incubation period. So when you visually don't see it, you don't know what is it, it's more scary. So you don't know, probably you use water and it's already polluted with something. Maybe it's on your clothes. So that's why it's more, you know, scaring for population. So the enduring threat can be fueled by several trends, such as scientific and technological advances, a greater diffusion of technologies, an easy dissemination of information and knowledge, an increasing flows of travelers and goods, which is very much a European problem. And I want to stress the last one, it's a black market and dark web. At this moment, of course, we are losing to dark web, so where you can buy many things and even biological elements. So that's very important to take into consideration. And when we see the modus operandi, so how probable terrorists will behave, so we may say that modus operandi with cyber goes more or less with the modus operandi of other terrorist attacks. So what we see now at European stage, so we see terrorist attacks which are performed with conventional weapons, but with unconventional methods. And I think that more or less goes the same to Siberian. So we see conventional, more or less conventional methods. It means chemical agents, but which are delivered or performed by unconventional ways. So I think we will have more or less the same next, I don't know, 3-5 years. I will not go to details. I don't think that is necessary to explain that it's not that difficult to create some chemical, particularly chemical weapons. I just refer you to beginning of ISIS. If you remember, it was a very famous ISIS slogan, cook a bomb in your mother's kitchen. So More or less it's the same. So with information and internet, with availability of chemical elements, you can cook it at home. It's not necessary to have a very sophisticated lab, and we should take it in consideration. Of course, we should also remember about biological, radiological, or even nuclear threats. And I do refer, because it's interesting that not many people know that Europe already had a dirty bomb case. Luckily, it was not exploded, but in 1996, during the Chechen conflict, Chechen rebellions, Chechen terrorists created dirty bomb and actually showed in Moscow, in Moscow Park, so they put it under the bench to show that it's not that difficult to do it. So when disasters strike, governments and aid organizations are not always in a position to help communities immediately. Even when governments and organizations can help, usually their resources are often stretched. Meanwhile, CBRN is different also because of novelty. We see that the preparedness to CBRN is quite varying in countries. Those countries who were more, at European level, who were, for example, more involved in Cold War situation, they have better preparedness. And those countries who were a little bit aside of Cold War struggle, they usually don't know much, they don't have enough capacity, they don't know how to react. And more particularly, their hospitals are not prepared to receive victims from CBRN attacks. Therefore, there is a need for communities to develop non-conventional and, what is more important, not expensive protection methods oriented towards citizens and encourages their involvement. So resources were poured into, because at the European level, because it started to more close attention from 2009, I think, after Litvinenko case, resources were poured more in preventing and responding to such incidents, and often focusing on improving technical and organizational capabilities. In spite of significant progress made in the technical and procedural responses to CBRN events, for many high-impact risks, responders don't understand what the public actually expects in a situation and how public will be tolerant to these really abnormal risks. So I spoke with many responders in many European countries. They don't know at what level people will tolerate if it happens, at what degree it will be all right. So I think it's a very important, and if here we have people from civil defense, it's very important to think about it. So I will not go to a question of community, but I think more or less we understand the same, that it's some kind of constituent population. So it could be neighborhood, it could be town, it could be city. And of course, the problem is that it's no universal definition of resilience. If you go to US, for example, you will see that the definition of resilience is completely different and opposite what people think about resilience, let us say, in Israel or in the UK. Of course, we always think, is it actually personality trait? If it's a personality trait, for example, I'm resistant, so then how you can influence my resistance? Any external influences will not count. Or it could be a dynamic process, that we can do something, we can make people, community resilient. As I see from researchers, most of the researchers think that it's a dynamic process. You can influence resilience, you can do something, you can contribute, which of course it's a positive sign. And what I already said, that resilient can be at individual level, so resilient can be at community level, and resilient can be in the characteristics of the incident. I will explain it later. Resilience at a community level refers to feelings of belonging to a certain community or having emotional ties to a place or geographical region in which the victim feels at home, safe, or emotionally connected with the community. Why I stress on that? Because we see a lot of people move, especially at European level. So if, for example, Portuguese live in Belgium and something happened in Portugal, they belong to this community, they belong to community in Portugal and vice versa. The more cohesive a community and the stronger the ties with the region, the stronger the resilience of both individual and community may turn out to be, although this way may also stand in the way during the recovery process. Sometimes victims are relocated and must leave their home and social network, and then they probably do not belong to community. I see that there are a lot of expectations that victims at community level will unite, they will have groups, they will have self-help. It's good, there are groups of victims, but I think we should not expect that much. So it's not always the case. So it's not about Siberian, for example, but I see the situation with victims after Brussels attacks. It's not a group because it didn't work. So we shouldn't expect that much. What is a community resilience and Siberian? It's the ability to respond effectively and recover from any stressor in responding to a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons event. Simply stated, it is the ability of individual, a community, and a nation to return to some semblance of normalcy. So we'll never have the same situation what we had before. We will have at least a semblance of normalcy, but still we understand that it doesn't mean that people will not experience stress or they will depressed, etc. So we understand that, but they can return to function with minimal disruption. What is interesting, because I mentioned it, that resilience also is inside of incident itself. Probably you noticed that man-made incidents, especially terrorist attacks, seem to be comparatively more difficult to cope than natural disasters. So people after terrorist attacks, after man-made incidents, are more stressed, the society is more stressed, and of course the consequences are more deeper in society than if you have natural disasters. It's amazing because usually in natural disasters you have more victims, but anyway, the situations like this, so we always should keep that in mind, that people will feel more stressed. Of course, the dose or exposure is also important. So particularly people who are directly in a situation, and we see that they experience more depression or post-traumatic stress disorder and so on. So now we come to information, how we should provide information, and here we come that information should be speedy. So when you deliver information about incidents, it should be speedy, clear, relevant, trustworthy, and non-contradictory. I would like to explain some points. First of all, clear. When you have Siberian incident, the information is not easy to understand because it's more, you have more terms, definitions, scientific information. So information should be delivered in a clear way. You shouldn't deliver it in a way that people are more scared because of with formula, with name of elements. Not contradictory. That happens when you have several speakers from different agencies. So, for example, from law enforcement point of view, they already don't have problems. So the terrorist attack happened, they did their job, so they deliver information like everything is okay, under control. But people who are working on a health side will say, we have a lot of problems, we don't know how to treat these people, etc. And then this information will look contradictory for people who receive it. So I will, because I want to skip, because I guess I do have time. Okay. So the thing is, of course, that during the Siberian attack, so we have to understand that victims, the population, could be not only victims, but also first responders. And I think we should take it seriously. That in such incidents, probably in most countries, people should be first responders. So, therefore, we have to understand that Siberian actually influences public not only from physical, not only from the point of physical trauma and fatalities, but very much changes psychological and behavioral impacts. I would like you, there are a lot of researches on that, so if you have interest, I will recommend you after the presentation, because with Siberian attacks, it's very important to see the behavioral changes. So, because it's a real stress, and it's a very different than any other incident. The public response can make a positive difference to the impact of Siberian events, of course. For example, members of the public can prevent widespread contamination by following health advice during an incident. But public behavior also has the potential to overwhelm the capacity of health systems. We have a case study, of course, the terrorist attack in Japan of 1996, and it's very, very interesting that the problem was not actually people who were affected, really affected by Zarine, but people who thought that they are affected. So I think we should count like, 1/6, it's like one really affected, 6-10 people who think they are affected. So that's why when you do planning of response, you should count that you will have more people who think they are affected, so they will develop psychosomatic reactions. They will have probably the problem with breathing, the other reactions which will similar to those as the victims have, but on reality they are not really affected. So a combination of factors shapes public responses to Siberian, and I put it public threat perception, so how actually public think about this threat, trust in responders, perceptions of response measures, and communication with the public. So here it's a very important. So what I see when I train law enforcement, that all communication starts with a crisis. If you start your communication with population when something happened, then you will be behind Twitter, Facebook, all social networks. You will be behind of everything. So you can't start communication with population when it's already something happened. You should start it on the phase of prevention. The problem is that people don't want, people who work in this area don't want to do that. So we were talking about, yesterday we were talking about previous commissioner of ECHO, and she said a very correct phrase that responses usually has sex appeal, because it's government authorities, they show their best when they respond to accident, but risk it's boring. And communication with people before it takes time, it's not clear how you should communicate, but you should start to communicate before. So you should communicate a whole cycle of risk and crisis management. So you should start communicate at prevention. Effective risk communication can reduce uncertainty and improve confidence and trust in responders and their actions. Risk communication can only be effective if communicators understand the public information needs and communication preference in relation to Siberian events. But I already said in introduction, most of the responders don't know what actually public expects. So the responders don't know what public actually think if something happened like this. So what their expectations, what their needs. Of course, it's very important to have trust and two-way communication in the societies where people don't trust authorities, where authorities already had previous stories of lying or deceiving or hiding information. You will have a torrent of fake news. If you are interested in this topic, I will also recommend you to read something. So, because if a population already doesn't trust the responders, so you will tell, for example, we have, I don't know, 60 victims, 60 corpses, but people will think, no, they're lying, so they have more, or something like that. So, of course, it's necessary to have trust. And the communication should be two-way, so you should also listen people what they say. But governments often lack a plan to inform the people. They don't know how will it share information, who will share it, and when will it do so. And it's also other things which I want to mention, which is very important, that particularly in Siberian cases, victims expect that they will receive information from individuals with formal authority. So don't be scared to place people who are really in charge, supervisors, to speak to population. As you place, for example, you always have a press attaché or a person who speaks on behalf of law enforcement. It's not good to do it in a situation like this. So put the correct person, because people should see that someone with a clear leadership quality, someone who is really supervising, that he controls the situation. So now we come to a very interesting dilemma. I don't know, do you know Catch-22? So it's a very famous dilemma of responders. Quickly, I will explain what Catch-22. For example, the young person applies for a job, and people say, we can take you, but only if you have very good work experience. But he can't have work experience because of his age, but he will be taken if he has experience. In the responder's case, it's, for example, I think, okay, I will go and talk to population, I will explain them about Siberian threats. But then I think, okay, I will start explaining, and then they will panic. No, it's better if I don't say anything, I will hide this. But then they have panic because I didn't tell anything. So that's a very tricky thing, and of course, it's difficult to advise, because I think you should really think about your own community, about your own country, how it will work, because it's really necessary to be cautious with that. I explained, yesterday we were talking about this. Once I was training a private sector on active shooter situation, and unfortunately I had the same problem, because when I came people were more relaxed, but after training they were more anxious, and some people were even panicking. And you think maybe it's probably better not to talk like this, so not to tell everything to people. If you are interested, there were several projects of European Commission about this. It's a practice project which tried to solve the problem of Catch-22. So I would like to finish by saying that, of course, we still need to see case studies. So I really refer to case studies. So, of course, it's Chernobyl nuclear station disaster, so it's not much, but still you can see it at Fukushima, so it's one type of Siberian disaster. Of course, it's a terrorist attack in a Japanese metro station. Also, of course, poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko in 2006 and Salisbury attack in 2018. So look how governments reacted. Unfortunately, I represent British Institute, but I would need to say that the community resilience wasn't respected during Salisbury attack. And I think the clear sign that it was a mistake, a lot of mistakes were done by British government, that the son of victim of, because you know that one of the victims was a woman who passed by, and she took the perfume where Novichok was inside. She died, and now the son of the victim wrote the letter to Putin asking to explain what's happened with his mother. I think that shows that the victims' needs were neglected, and victims already in a state of misunderstanding whom they should talk, to whom they should address their needs. So thank you very much, and if you need more information about fake news during the events like these disasters, and or you need more information about Catch-22, I will be very happy to talk about this after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you, Lina, to raise our awareness about the importance of community resilience in order to prevent, I hope, not to react for non-conventional terrorist threat. This is very important to know how to reinforce this community resilience. I hope that we will have some small discussion after. Now we will have our last presentation today. It will be provided by Professor Anna Letournel. Anna Letournel is the professor from Polytechnic Institute of Setúbal, and she has a master in biomedical engineering and PhD in fundamental physics. Her specialty is biophysics. He's working in Institute for Plasma and Nuclear Fusion of Institute Superior Técnico Lisbon, and she is also attached to Interdisciplinary Center for Applied Research on Health in School of Health. He has some very interesting communication on the area of physics, on the laser, on the biophysics. Please, Anna, the floor is yours. Anna will speak in Portuguese, I think. Probably we will need some support.
No, it's okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, good morning. As it was told before, my name is Anna Letournel, and I'm a professor here in the Institute Polytechnic of Setúbal. And as it was said before by my colleague of panel, I will try to communicate clearly about nuclear energy. So I'm here almost in representation of the scientific part, and I will try to explain clearly nuclear energy. So starting from the beginning, energy. What is energy? When you think of energy, you can think of many things, like the sun. The sun gives us energy to our planet. It's a free energy, as we can say. And the word energy comes from Greek and says work from within. We need to have energy to function. And our society, which is organized by us, also needs energy to function. So we have energy that can be provided by fossil fuels, by renewable energies that is expanding right now, and we have nuclear fuels. And the only one in the list that is for free, as I said before, it's the sun. So what is the problem? The problem is that the population is growing, and as you may have heard, the fossil fuels are decreasing and will not be able to account for all the growth of the population in the next 50 years. So I think by 2050, we might have a problem of energy if we only think about the energy given by the fossil fuels. That is why we have a second and very important part, which is the renewable energy that is being conducted by many enterprises right now. And of course, we have the nuclear fuels that it has been going on, and most people are maybe frightened of it because of everything that has already happened. Nuclear energy, we think about, first thing, we think about Chernobyl, which, as you can see, was destroyed. There was an explosion in the reactor. The reactor liberated all the nucleotides, radioactive, that it had inside. And of course, everyone around was impacted, and in their health, in their crops, in the water, the radioactivity spread everywhere. And after we thought that we had reached new level of safety, but as we've seen in Fukushima, if we put the nuclear energy together with natural phenomena such as earthquakes and tsunamis, the reactors may not hold, as you've seen, as we all saw in Fukushima. So what are the dangers? Of course, you all heard that many people died after the explosions. People immediately died that were in the close radius to the place where the radiation was emitted. Why? Because these particles that are radioactive particles, they can cause cellular death, mutations, and cancer. These particles are really dangerous because they are highly energetic. So it means they have really a lot of energy. You can see that we have in the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, we only have one type of radiation, which is the highest and most energetic, which is the gamma rays. That is the only one that is considered to be radioactive, and radioactive, yes. And then we have particles. So what are particles? Particles are nucleus or electrons. So if you go and think about an atom, you have in the middle, you have a nucleus, and then around you have electrons. If you separate them, or you put them together and bind them together, if you play with the atom, you can unleash enormous amounts of energy. But this is happening everywhere around us, inside of us. So the nuclear energy actually is everywhere. You see that the biggest part is from a gas, which is called radon, and this radon is a result of a decay, of a radioactive decay of the uranium. Everyone out here maybe already heard of uranium. So this uranium decays naturally as well. It's used in nuclear reactions, but in nature it decays naturally. And when it decays naturally, it emits this gas, which is highly radioactive, and it's the biggest source of radiation that we are exposed in nature when we go out. We have cosmic radioactivity because we have highly energetic particles coming from the cosmos. We have the Earth because we all also have highly energetic particles inside our planet. Internal, inside of us, we have isotopes. What are isotopes? Isotopes is actually an atom that has a different configuration, but it's still the same atom because it has the same number of protons. And we have 18% of the radioactivity is man-made for electronic products and nuclear medicine. Nuclear medicine is a kind of medicine that will utilize radioactivity to heal or to do diagnosis in humans. I will not speak long about blocking radiation. I will just say that we can block it effectively depending on what is the particle that we are working with. So if we are speaking about an alpha particle, which means 2 protons and 2 neutrons, we can stop it with paper. If we have a beta particle, which means electrons or positrons, we can stop it with aluminum, with foil of aluminum. Gamma rays, which is radiation, does its only energy, it doesn't have any mass, can be stopped with lead. And neutrons, which is another component of the nucleus, we have protons and neutrons, can be stopped with concrete. For instance, it can be stopped with other things. I have been speaking about the nucleus. So what is the nucleus? The atomic nucleus is almost the same because it's composed by protons and neutrons. So you can choose the color you want. Blue can be the neutrons and red can be the protons. They are more or less equal in mass, but the protons are charged positively. The neutrons don't have any charge. So if we think about charges the particles that have the same charge, when you think of a magnet, if you have a magnet, it's the same charge, you see that it will repel, because you have physical forces that will make the atoms or the particles to repel. In the nucleus, we only have positively charged particles, which means that for the nucleus to stay together, there has to be a huge amount of energy that will bind the nucleus together. Otherwise, it will repel naturally. So these forces are really, really, really high, really extreme, one of the highest in our universe. And these are the forces that we play, so to say, when we are doing nuclear reactions. So if we change the configuration of this nucleus, we can extract an enormous amount of energy. So the nucleus can be split. So we have one nucleus, and we split it in 2. This is nuclear fission. It's what is done now in the power plants, in nuclear power plants. From one big, and usually the one big is uranium, 235, you split it in 2, and you will have an enormous amount of energy coming from this reorganization in 2 smaller nuclei. And you can have the other way around. You can have 2 small nuclei that can come together, and when they come together, all the nuclear orbitals have to rearrange, and when they are rearranging, there is going to be even more energy that's going to be produced, because it's a rearranging of a system. This is the dream, we can say, because this is much more safe and has practically no waste, radioactive waste. So both processes can release energy. Nuclear power plants today. As I told you before, we use usually uranium-235, in which I told you before that uranium can decay naturally, because all the elements can decay naturally. However, if we make a reaction out of it, we can have a neutron, which is the N, a neutron that is accelerated, and it will bump against the atom in really, 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 really extreme velocity. It can break the atom in two, or the nucleus in two, and we'll have an enormous amount of energy that is going to be released. What is the problem with this? Well, the good thing is that it's very efficient as a power source. A lot of countries use power plants, as you've seen, in order to have electrical energy. France, by instance, uses a lot, I think most of their energy is by nuclear, if I'm not mistaken. But it generates radioactive wastes. And when you add the neutrons, when you accelerate the neutrons against the uranium-235, you're going to enrich uranium. And when you enrich uranium, you have what it takes to have the nuclear bombs. And of course, to extract this uranium, it's also really heavy and it takes a lot of instrumentation to do. But it's highly efficient, the conversion in energy. That's why it's used nowadays. And that's why people still continue to commission nuclear energy for longer times, for longer periods. So the nuclear power plants tomorrow. As I showed you in the beginning, I showed you one image of energy, and the image of energy was the sun. So what if we did the same thing on Earth that the sun does itself? So the sun actually works on fusion, nuclear fusion. You have two nuclei that will rearrange together and that will expel enormous amount of energy. So we will have almost like a sun-like energy. We will have limitless fuel, no greenhouse gases, it's safer, and you will not have radioactive waste. And of course, since we are comparing it with the sun, you will have a larger scale of energy production. This is the reaction. You have the reaction that occurs inside the sun. Usually you have hydrogen with electrons, and you will have only for 4 protons. You will have 26.7 mega electron volt, which is the measure of energy. If you do it in the lab, in the laboratory, we can do it in the laboratory, and you have deuterium and tritium, which, as I told you before, I spoke about something called isotopes. So it means that they also have 1 proton, but they have neutrons, more neutrons. The hydrogen is only 1 proton, but the other ones, they have neutrons attached, which means that they are they have the same charge, but they are heavier. So we have 2 or 3 masses inside of these atoms that will combine together and that will give helium, which is an inoffensive gas, and a lot of energy. If you compare the total energy of this is 4 protons, 4 particles. You will have 17.6, and in order to do the same thing and to extract the energy, we would need uranium-235 plus the protons. It's a bigger, much bigger mass, which means that the conversion efficiency of this process is way more interesting, so to say. Of course, that this cannot happen, this doesn't happen in nature. It's very, very complicated to reproduce, and we need extreme temperatures. As you know, the sun is also at an extreme temperature, and in order to be able to do this kind of reactions, we need to be in extreme temperatures, which means that we are no longer in the world that we studied in school, where you have the solid, the liquid, and the gas states. You have solid, liquid, gas, and a new state that is plasma, the plasma state, which means that every particle inside is ionized. It's really, really hot. They can be accelerated, and they can be forced and to fuse. Yes. Nuclear fusion experimental reactors. This is not controlled yet. This is for the future. That's why I told it is a plan for the future. We have at IST the tokamak, which is the reactor, experimental reactor. Tokamak is a Russian word for this reactor where you have the hot dense plasma that will be the source for the fusion. And in 2025, it is scheduled to be the appearance of the International Thermonuclear Experiment Reactor, which is called ITER. It's in Karadash in France, and it's supposed to be, now they are using it to do plasma experiments. So they are just trying to see if they can confine and control the reaction, because it's not at all controlled. And no one wants to try to use energy from an uncontrolled source. So it's not possible right now. Now they are just doing the part of the plasma. They are trying to control, and in 2025, we are hoping that it will be in place. In IST, of course, there is also a small one from parts that were decommissioned, and it's only used now, or mostly used now, to do a plasma investigation, plasma research. So I was really, really quick because I already finished my presentation. So I hope that I managed to enlighten you a bit about nuclear physics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Anna promised us the lesson of physics, and it was. So we have some questions for, I think that for every of our presenters. May I see the questions first, please? Critical infrastructure. I think that it's a question for Charles, please. If you want to comment.
So, thank you very much. So the question is, how should the states protect private critical infrastructures? How to protect critical services who are private, but are essential to people's lives in case of attacks or catastrophes? Yes, that's a key question. That's why I insisted on the need of partnerships between the public and the private sector. Some of our most important critical infrastructures can be private. What I think is important to keep in mind is that private operators, they want their infrastructures to keep running. There's a willingness on their side. They want to protect their investment, and they want to maintain the services because it provides them with revenues. So first, I think there needs to be a good acknowledgement of this mindset. Now the question is how to encourage that, how to partner with them, how to make sure that they will invest sufficiently in protection, in resilience, and to the diversity of shock events that they might have to face. And to do that, I think that engaging with them, building trust through indeed information sharing, but also joint exercises, also some more services that governments can propose to those operators in terms of sharing with them information about risks that the operators might not have. I think it's encouraging them to become a partner. And then once you really have established a good partnership, you can be able to move beyond, to do some inspections, to have some more strict eventual regulations that they are forced to implement, and if they do not, they might lose their license, they might have some fines. That's what I presented in the last slide. I mean, there's a series of policy instruments that can be used by governments. The question is, what is the most efficient? And for that, I think it depends on each country context. It depends also on the different sectors as well, because you might not have the same approaches in the energy sector, in the IT sector. You might not have the same approaches in a sector where there's a lot of competition and many different operators, or when there's a monopoly. So that all needs to be taken into consideration. One last aspect when it comes to private and in a competitive sector is that the private companies, they're also quite attached to their image, and you may be able to play with that. If, for instance, and this is done in some countries, you do some regular inspections and you rank the different companies according to their level of resilience. This can have impact on their image. This could eventually have impact on the markets. We talked yesterday about climate information disclosure. This is becoming a tool that is more and more widely utilized, and this could have impact on the market. So just to exemplify a few list of tools and possibilities on government side to address resilience in the private sector.
Thank you, Charles. I think that it's the same question we might speak also to ask to Lina, because it's some kind of link to the community resilience. So if you want to comment something.
Well, actually, Charles, remember that we discussed this question in Casablanca in November. So I think, yeah, it's a very difficult question, public-private partnership, because, you know, particularly because we have more and more private owners who are foreigners in countries, and they probably don't care about your perception of resilience. For example, they have own perception of resilience, they need money. And I think, first of all, we can encourage by probably some schemes on taxes, so encourage them financially. And I agree that we may also encourage by some regulations, some inspections. But I see the problem, of course, in information sharing, because, you know, it's a huge problem that private sector doesn't want to report what's going on their side. Quite a good example of, if you probably know, it was practically, it's not fulfilled, but attempt of terrorist attack on a nuclear station in Belgium, and Belgian authorities have known about that practically 3 or 4 months afterwards, so because private owner didn't want to report about this. The same problem is with state organizations, because we have a problem of sharing information among state agencies, so it's difficult, but state agencies also quite reluctant to share information, especially sensitive information, with private sector. And I think it should be a lot of work in building the trust, so in different ways, but to build a trust that you can trust, you can actually share something. Maybe not in a very big extent, but still share, maybe give some exercises, some trainings to provide them understanding what kind of threats they they can meet. In Casablanca, we discussed the problem of, for example, of kidnappings and attacks on the pipes in Algeria. And I think here a state should also perform better roles. So in many cases, state should help the private sector to protect and to make some joint groups, joint efforts to protect critical infrastructure, because it's very important for economy, it's very important for image of the country and so on.
Thank you, Lina. So we have to cooperate in order to survive. Another questions? We have loss of energy infrastructure, knowing the high investment for redundancy. Is the same this infrastructure once again?
So yes, how can we mitigate the loss of the energy infrastructure, knowing that it is a high investment but in redundancy? Yes. Yes, I mean, as I said, there are different ways to go about increasing resilience in the electricity sector. Of course, when you mention electricity, first we need to distinguish a little bit, because, I mean, you can be talking about electricity production, all the different facilities, and you can be talking about energy transport or distribution, which are two different aspects of electricity as a critical infrastructure. I think when it comes to electricity production, well, there will obviously never be investments in just a redundant facility that is not used in general, but just used in case one fails. That will never happen. So I think it will never be part of the economic calculation. So I think we should concentrate the response on the electricity transmission and distribution. Yes, redundancy is costly. I think investing in robustness can be quite efficient. To be sure that your electricity lines, you can put them more subterranean. I have the example, for instance, in Finland. In Finland, there was a major storm in 2011, which led to, I think, 500,000 households being cut from the electricity, and some of them during quite a long period of up to several weeks. And that represents a big portion of the Finnish population. So that was a big shock for the country with huge impacts. And so after that, they decided, look, well, we need to do something about it. We need to increase the resilience of our electricity networks. And what they said is, look, well, we'll set up a long-term objective to all the operators by 2028. So I think it was, they gave them 15 years. You should not have electricity cuts longer than 6 hours for urban areas and longer than 36 hours for rural areas. And so, yes, you need to invest. And they have a major investment plan of, I think, 9 billion euro. And they are step by step increasing the resilience of the electricity network. Of course, those costs have to be financed. And at the end of the day, it is true that it has impact on the cost to customers. And there have been increased costs up to 30% in some places, with some reaction of the people. But you know, at the end of the day, we need to decide what we want. I mean, if people want a more reliable electricity, if it is a strong societal demand, they will have costs, and those costs will have to be supported. Now, I don't say that everywhere you need to increase very highly the robustness of those systems. There are also other options, focusing more on rapid recovery. You can have some generators, some teams that are well trained for rapid restoration. There's also a natural renewal of networks. I mean, they have a lifetime, so usually those infrastructures have been built with a certain lifetime, and they will be renewed, and that can be seen as an opportunity during the renewal to have more robust technologies in place and to use that as an opportunity to increase resilience. And I would say that it's the main message. The main message is use every opportunity that exists to look closely at the different risks that those networks can face, to integrate resilience in the planning. If it is integrated, there will be solution. If it is not integrated, you know, no one will take care.
Thank you, Charles. Next question, please. I think that it's the question for Lina. Do you consider the likelihood of the biological attack at the same level as chemical or radiological one, considering the difficulties to weaponize the agent?
Yeah. Well, you know, 20 years ago we considered even chemical attacks as, you know, difficult one. And you see with the, what I already mentioned with availability of information, availability of components. If you, I don't know, have you ever tried dark web? For my work, I sometimes look at the dark web. You can buy everything, even biological components are already available. Of course, it's always a risk for people who deal with biological weapons. But we have to see that we have more and more skillful people in terrorist groups. Then we have to understand that we have state actors, we have non-state actors, but who have ability. So I think we should already think that biological attack that we will have. But we already had in 2001 in US, anthrax. And you see, so it was successful in a certain way, and people who did it were not prosecuted, they were not caught. So I think we should take it very seriously. So maybe not now, not tomorrow, but I think it will happen. So, because chemical agents now, it's already, you know, it's already available, and you can do it, I mean, kids can do it at a secondary school, so it's the reality.
Thank you, Lina. I think so also that we have to be prepared. Next question, I think that it's also for you. Sarin news in Tokyo attacked had only 20% of purity. Do you agree that the real consequence was to realize that it's possible to produce a warfare chemical agent by anyone in a garage?
Yeah, so the attack of 1996 was the first lethal attack with chemical agents which was performed by non-state actor. So it's, you know, it's a line. So afterwards, governments understood that it's because before all chemical agents, biological agents were considered as a property of governments, only state actors. And of course, it was a sign that, yeah, you see that you may have a group, you may have a terrorist group which can use the Siberians the same as governments can use. That's true. That was a sign, clear message. And if you probably know, I don't know how you're really aware of US Homeland Security programs. The shift in US Homeland Security program started not from 11th September, it started from this attack. So when US government understood that we have to change Homeland Security, we have to change the way how we think about Homeland Security. So we see that non-state actors already have access to things which before were accessible only to states. So. Yeah, that's
Lina, it's really frightening to think about this, that anybody can produce something like that in the garage, but of course we have to think about this. Next question. Next question is for Anna. Do you think Portugal should have a nuclear plant?
Do you think Portugal should have a nuclear plant in face of fossil fuel resources decline? If yes, where to install? Well, it's a difficult question to answer. Well, we all know that the fossil fuels are declining. We all know that Portugal is also really committed to the renewable energies, and we all know that it doesn't give the same amount of energy as the other two can have. Should we have it right now? I don't think I can answer that question because it's very complicated. And if yes, where to install it, it's also a really complicated question. Knowing that it will work, if it's right now, it will work on nuclear fission, we will have radioactive waste. We already have a problem with the one in Spain, in the border. For now, I cannot answer.
I have a question to Anna. Do you just convinced us that it's possible to have a nuclear energy clean?
If it is possible to have clean nuclear energy, this one, how is that nuclear sun-like energy then generates? Okay, so fusion, nuclear fusion, it's different, but it's actually, when we think about radioactivity, it's natural. That's point number one. Every element will have a radioactive decay, which can be, it means that they will liberate radioactive particles or energy. They can liberate it in seconds, which is highly reactive. They can liberate it in centuries, which is not highly reactive, but it will liberate as well. How is that nuclear sun-like energy? Well, because you will have the product, it will be helium. And in order to do it, you will need deuterium, which you can find in water, because deuterium is 1 proton and 1 neutron, and you will have to have tritium. That is a bit more tricky, but it also has a decay that is shorter, which means that in long term you don't have any radioactive waste. But that is in case of an accident, and if the reactive components of the fusion will be expelled to nature. So you'll have only a problem with tritium, but it's not very high because it has a short decay. And helium, you don't have any problem, and with the energy, it will just dissipate. It dissipated in all the other big two that I showed you, that you have a high dissipation of energy. That's a problem, yes. If you're close, in a close radius, it can be a problem, with any explosion or with any facility that liberates and works with energy. So we considered it as a zero radioactive waste because of this physical property. You will have a radioactive decay, much smaller. If you see what happened in the fission reactors, you have, I told you before that you have the uranium-235. It can decay in nature as well. And the radon is a result. And it's almost 60% of the radiation that we have when we go outside. So that is natural. That stays there. That is in Chernobyl, in Fukushima. It's there. Because it takes longer to extract all the radiation particles, energy that it can still emit. If you think about this, it's much quicker. So you have a clean area sooner, if something happened, if it will be implemented.
So we will believe that it might happen.
Yes.
Near future. I don't know, we don't have any other questions? The sun-like energy intrinsically safe. It was your explanation. Any other questions? Another question, ITER project.
Okay, is there a danger coming from reaching higher temperatures than the sun at the Earth laboratories like the ITER project? Well, the ITER, I've showed you the picture. It's a really huge container, and inside you will have the plasma that is going to be walking around. Of course, all of this is a thermonuclear reactor, so you will have a lot of security blindagem, a lot of layers that will contain everything inside, and of course that will shut down at the minimum problem because it's immense amount of energy and it's a lot of plasma. Now we can do plasma in a small amount, and it's already a lot of energy, thermal energy. If you will have in ITER, they are studying and they are developing for it to have a huge amount of plasma mass, then you have a lot of layers. I don't remember the name in English now. Blindagem. A lot of layers that will protect and restrain everything inside. And in the event of something happen, there is going to be a shutdown, of course. How do I calculate nuclear energy risk? Well, that's a risk question. That is a risk question.
Requires mathematics.
It requires mathematics. Of course, when we engineers, we do any kind of plan to build whatever, we always have a quality factor applied to it, which means that we need to prepare for it to uphold much more than it actually does. How can we calculate nowadays on ITER? We cannot, because we cannot control it yet. It's still ongoing. How can we calculate nuclear energy risk for fission? I think there has been calculation done because it's operating, and if not, it would not be possible for it to be operating. So I think that maybe one of you can explain the risks. How can you calculate?
No, what I can just say is that if you look at the example of what happened in Fukushima, what you can try to calculate is the potential impact of different scenarios of nuclear risks. And when you do that, what is particularly important is to integrate all the potential indirect consequences. Indeed, I mean, Fukushima, not only there was a large contamination of a large part of land and people who needed to be evacuated and sheltered, on all the economic activities in those areas that were lost. So that's one of the costs that you will integrate. But beyond that, it led to closing many other nuclear facilities in Japan with some economic consequences as well. Ultimately, it also led Germany to decide to stop nuclear energy. I mean, do you integrate that in the calculation of the consequences? It had impact also on the exports of Japan, agricultural products, fish products, exports were diminished significantly. So these are all the kind of aspects that you need to integrate. I think there's been some calculation. When we did this work on the risk of flood from the Seine River, we looked at the potential indirect impacts. And when it comes to nuclear risks, there's always a big fear factor that you need to integrate as well. It's the long-term implication it can have on behavior of people. If you think, for instance, a major nuclear accident in France, how would it impact the tourism industry, even in areas that are not hit by the accident itself, but because of the image and the fear factor that is particularly high that it could generate. So these are just a few examples. I've not made calculation of nuclear risk, but I think it's important to take the wider possible view on the potential impact, and then you need to correlate that with the probability of this kind of scenario occurring, and that is your calculation.
Lina, do you want to?
I completely agree with Charles, and I think when you calculate such risks, you should invite as many as possible stakeholders, because sometimes you think that it's only, you have 3-5 stakeholders, but you have more stakeholders. Think wide. So who else will be, touched if you have a problem? So think, out of the box in some way, because that's correct that it can be tourism which can be influenced. It could be, agriculture. So think, more wide in some way. So thank you.
Thank you. Another question? Just for Anna, please.
So, acha que o governo português deveria implementar um plano mais exaustivo em referência ao risco nuclear da central nuclear de Almaraz, na Extremadura espanhola? Do you think the government should implement a more exhaustive plan referencing the risk of the nuclear risk of the nuclear central in Spain, in the Spanish border? So, I've never been to this nuclear center. What I've read, because I've never been there, what I've read was that there was it was supposed to cease activity, and then it was recommissioned for I don't know how many years more. I want to believe that the European Union and Commission is checking if the central is in conditions to operate for these longer years, or if it's not, I think they may have done the alterations needed and required for it. So what might be the problem? I think the problem for, and everyone thinks about that, the problem is the waste, right? The nuclear waste that is close to the border of Portugal. And for that, again, I think I'm not the indicated person to say if they should stop it completely or continue it again, as I cannot say if we should do it one here or not at this instance. But if you think if the government should do something about, the thing was that we had this central, it's not us, Spain has this central, and it was supposed to cease operations like some years ago, and it was recommissioned again. So I hope that but you have all the rules usually. So in order for it to be in operation, a certain number of very, very strict rules should be implemented and followed. Otherwise, it will clearly shut down. Yes.
Here I want to mention because we were talking about nuclear waste, and from the terrorism point of view, it's a very important when you actually send your nuclear waste in other countries and third countries, you should actually follow what's going on with this nuclear waste, because there we have a potential to have the use of this nuclear waste again in dirty bombs and etc. So that's, you see that we have always a cycle. You think that okay, you finished here in this country, you sent something in another country and it's over. No, it's not over. It can come back in other form again. So that's what we have to take into consideration.
Thank you. I think that we will finish because it's a very interesting discussion, very hot about this. As always, when we are discussing nuclear waste and nuclear activity, so we will continue it in the lunchtime. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you for participation.
Só um instante, por favor. Peço que não se levantem, porque vamos entregar umas pequenas lembranças à professora Bogoslava Sardinha, que faz parte, de resto, da comissão organizadora desta conferência. Uma salva de palmas para os nossos palestrantes da manhã. Charles Bobion, em representação da OCDE, Lina Kolesnikova, do Instituto de Proteção Civil e Gestão de Emergências do Reino Unido, e Ana Latournelle, da Escola Superior de Saúde do Instituto Politécnico de Setúbal. Muito obrigado. Thank you very much. E pronto, está encerrada este período da manhã, deste segundo dia de conferências. Segue-se o almoço. Vamos retomar os trabalhos a partir das 2 da tarde, às 14 horas. Pedimos a todos que estejam na sala por volta dessa hora, para que podemos prosseguir com os nossos trabalhos. Bom dia e até mais daqui a pouco.